Welcome to TheAdipose's LittleBigPlanet Karting tutorial series part 1, and in this video tutorial series I'm going to be taking you all the way through from simple racing tracks to advanced racing tracks, looking at jumps and flips and weapons and some mini games as well for fun. And in this very first part of this video tutorial series we're going to be looking at your very first track. So let's get racing. Now, to make your very first track, you're going to need to come along to your moon, which is on the right hand side of your poppet. Find yourself an empty slot on the moon, and in you go. Now, when you choose your style, I strongly recommend you go for one of the outdoor ones, which are near the bottom, because it's actually quite hard to make the indoor ones look good early on. But before you start doing your race, before you start doing your track, you need to plan out your course, because it is so easy to make a really bad course by just driving it out and just doing all sorts of random stuff. So spend 30 seconds in Photoshop and or Paint program and just work out roughly what you're gonna do. And this was the sketch I started with before I started to make my track. Now go back into the create mode, pick the race tool, and you drive it just like a car. So you accelerate, brake, etc., etc., and you turn left and right. And if you make a mistake or do something you don't like, you just reverse to get rid of it. And if you press the right stick, you can get a bird's eye view like I've got here, so I can see my track from above. So I'm going to try and replicate my picture that I drew with the track I'm doing here. Now, if you put the right stick up or down, if you look on the right hand side, you can see I've got that elevation going up and down there, and by doing that I can take my track up and down. And if you want to have any kind of tracks crossing over any other kind of tracks, you're going to need to have either you get one track higher or lower. If you press the square button at any time, it levels off your track. And of course, don't forget that when you do press left and right for the corners, you don't have to do really tight corners all the time. You can do gentle ones as well. Now, when you get close to completing your track, if you hold down the X button, it will automatically connect your track back up for you. And then the screen goes white and you have got your very first track complete. And if at any point you want to drive along it, just press down on the D-pad and you can drive along the track. But we want to try and improve this world before we do that. Now, we can do that by modifying the terrain. And you go into the terrain deform sections here, and you can choose different styles, and I've chosen soft hills. And you can make your hills big and small, but if you make them really large by pressing up on the D-pad, you can pull out huge hills and mountains out of the ground. But doing this will not affect your track, because if you can see here, I'm actually kind of drawing over my track, but my track isn't being affected. And this is going to give me the mountain section of my track that I was looking for. Now, this tool can be used to not only pull things up, but also used to push things down. And you do that by doing exactly the same thing, but instead of pulling up, you push down. And when you push down, it actually unveils water below the surface of the ground. Now, we're going to adjust the water level in a minute once we've put our lakes where we want them. And you can see now that the terrain for our first level is really starting to take shape already. We've got an area which is kind of open ground and an area which is kind of closed ground, which is going to give a lot of interest to the player when they are going through it. You can also paint this terrain by going to the bottom of the terrain editor, and you literally just grab a different terrain, again scale it up, choose a shape, and you paint over the areas that you wish to change. Now, don't worry too much about the edges of your terrain, because as long as the player can't see those edges, it doesn't matter where they are. But I'm going to use that to paint my mountains one colour and have my desert areas another. Now, I'm also going to go and get some pre-made objects out of the poppet. If you could go and complete career mode or get the DLC time skipper, time fixer, whatever you want to call it, and you can go and grab loads of these pre-made objects. Now, in the future tutorials, we'll be looking at how to make your own objects and really kind of personalize what you're doing. But for now, there are loads of objects there, so I'm just going to go and grab a few pre-made houses and create a kind of town section to my track. It's always good to think in terms of zones, and so far I've got my town zone, and I've got my mountain zone, and I've got a few lakes here and there, so it'll make different sections of the track memorable for the player as they go round. So there's my little town, and note that I've got all of the buildings kind of facing the player. They're not facing the track flat on, they are facing the player, because obviously you kind of only travel down the track really one way. Also in the poppet, again in pre-made objects, I've got some sand piles here, which I'm just going to stick close to the track to give some more interest in the side. And again, you can scale these up, scale these down, and turn them all by using the D-pad on the left hand side. And I'm just going to again put these around this side as well, and it also helps to blend in with the background as well, so it doesn't just look like your track and then the background miles off. Putting these objects in the foreground helps it to feel like one kind of complete zone. Now on one of these little again, I'm just going to drive around here so you can see it, but on some of these sand dunes I think I've got a little bit high, and there's a little trick you can do with these objects, which is when you've put them down, you can then select them, and there's a little if you press the square button on them after you've selected them, there's an option that says, I think it's drop down to level or something like that. So left click on like that, snap to ground, that's it, and it just drops down to the floor. And in the case of these sand dunes, they only drop down a little bit, but for other objects you can just create them in the sky and then drop down to the level, and it makes creating them a lot quicker. Now the track at the moment is made of cardboard, and we're of course out in the Midwest, so what we're going to do is we're going to edit this track. You go to your track editors and you choose any of the different track designs that you want, and we're going to go with this sand here, and then you literally paint along the track to turn it into what you want to turn it into. And there we can see the sand looks far more like something that belongs in this kind of cowboy zone than others, but you don't have to do the whole track the same style. So I've done my area near my city something a little bit more kind of human-like, as in I've got those kind of mats down, but then I'm going back for my sand track for my entire mountain section, which I think will fit in a lot better than the original cardboard that was there. You can also paint the fences or change the fences, but I quite like the one I had. Note I had to do the bridge a different colour there, because you can't. There are bridge tracks and then there are ground tracks, and you can't use normal tracks where it is a bridge. Now you can also just actually paint out the tracks entirely, so it looks like the floor, and that's what I did in this last section here, again to make a kind of a different zone feeling. Last thing before we have a little go at our level, we're going to add some music, which is an object which we need to stick to an object in our level. You can't stick it to the floor, so I'm actually going to stick mine to this scoreboard because it is the only object around I can stick it to, but we will look at how to create other objects in a future tutorial. And while I'm doing that with this scoreboard, you can also move the scoreboard around by selecting it with the poppet, and again moving it up and down and around, remembering that the scoreboard will be the last thing that your players see in the level, so choose a nice location and you can turn it around as you like. And then of course before we complete our level, we're going to need the standard racing tools of boosters and weapons. Now don't just shove these down randomly. Think, maybe even make it part of your plan where you're going to put these items down. Now I tend to look for places in the track which I think are going to be slower, so for example this uphill section along here I think could do with a boost to keep the players' interest in the track. Zoom in carefully, move up and down with R2 and all that, and place it carefully. You can of course use that snap to ground feature I discussed earlier with the sand dune. Don't put too many boosts around. I mean, it's lovely to have a little string of boosts in a row, but then make sure you've got other sections of the track which are a bit more, where they're a bit more rare. I'm going to put a booster here in a bit of a sneaky place. It's going to be close into the corner, so the player has to turn carefully to get this boost, so not all players will do it. And then because you're going to do the same with the weapons, we're going to find some locations on the track where players will be able to pick them up, not too close to the boosts I think, but of course it's your design. And 1, 2, 3, 4 across the road, and we're going to do this in a couple of different locations, and then our very first track is ready to go. So try it yourself. Head onto your moon, load up an empty slot, design your track on paper first, draw it out, add some mountains, add some lakes, add some objects from the goodie bag, paint the floor, paint the fences, add some weapons, some music and some boosters, and you have made your very first race course. If you would like to have a little play with the level I have just made in front of you, you can head on to my moon, that's TheAdipose's moon, and copy this level onto your moon so you can play with it yourself. I would appreciate it if you could play the level on my moon first and give it a smile or a heart to encourage other people there as well. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like and of course subscribe if you want to make sure you see future editions. In part 2 we'll be looking at a completely different style of track and going into some more advanced techniques such as jumps and things like that. So I will see you very soon. Take care. Bye bye.